is really bad
for regular service, and you need a Wi-Fi. But yeah, welcome back to the Exchange Podcast. We don't have any internet issues, but you know who has issues? Don Lemon, Tucker Carlson, and I'm praying for Steven Crowder. Not really a huge fan.
Well, I think we all saw Don Lemon coming. His ratings, like CNN, have been dropping.
You know whose ratings have been up, though?
Whose?
The Exchange Podcast. I want to thank every single one of you on Facebook and YouTube and all of our other platforms that we are on. We had a great and wonderful episode with Sergeant Michael Murphy, and we might have him back just to give some updates on how things are going with him.
Yeah, welcome back. This is your host, Tom Paul Tipton. And again, I want to say thank you for the, you guys made last week's episode go over great. We're hoping that you continue to do this. Views were up, subscriptions are up, temperature's up.
Temperature is up, yeah.
So everything's up except for Joe Biden's testosterone. But with that said, we want to say thank you and welcome back. And a lot's been shaken up with the media here lately. All these people that are just getting walking papers.
Legacy media is shaking things up, but here's the thing. I think a lot of people forget that legacy media gets shaken up every 4 to 8 years. Things change. That's understood. Something new that's happening is definitely with this Steven Crowder debacle. A lot of people are getting onto him because he's a right-wing commentator and he advocates for things like a family being together and not splitting up. But he's going through a divorce right now, supposedly. And apparently it's because he's...
Crowder is? I heard something about that.
Yeah, something about being abusive. And then...
Of course.
But it wasn't just that, which...
Half of a $100 million contract's a lot better than half of what he used to have, right?
Yeah, but Candace Owens got involved. So the Daily Wire has somebody involved with all this.
No, I didn't get that. What is she saying?
She was just saying that because Crowder was making the claim that people in higher places were using this divorce situation, because it's been happening for the last 2 years. Since people in higher places knew about it, they were using it to extort him. So she took the stage to say, now Steven Crowder is claiming that I'm extorting him, even though that he was sending me suggestive...
Okay, back up. I want to make certain I heard this right. Candace Owens is saying this?
Candace Owens, yeah.
They've kind of been having a war going on.
Yeah, ever since the contract thing, and I was on the side of, the Daily Wire, and with all of that going on, there seems to be we all knew Steven Crowder was like this because Quarterback Garrett and Dave Landau have both left Louder with Crowder. I don't know if you've ever watched it. I've been watching.
Yeah, a little bit.
I've been watching Steven Crowder since 2017, and he's had different people on the show, and the people who have been leaving have been coming out, like Quarterback Garrett and Dave Landau, saying he's just very controlling. He's very very strong in his convictions, and it comes across as abusive and mean and whatnot. And I'm empathetic because I believe there is a way of being controlling without being a jerk. And Steven Crowder is definitely somebody that you'll see at times in his own videos where he's just a flat-out jerk for reasons unknown to me, but that is something that people have said. You have Candace Owens saying that his wife is leaving because she is being emotionally abused, and then a Ring camera video came out, believe it or not. And this was always wild to me.
Who was on whose Ring camera video?
Steven Crowder and his wife were at their home having a discussion about giving dogs medication. They only have one car. That car was going to be used. And then he was saying, no, you can't just take the car. I need it to get certain places. And some people are saying, okay, listen, you have the money. Why don't you have 2 cars? But even then, maybe a car's in the shop. Just take an Uber, Steven.
Okay, so Candace Owens wasn't showing up.
No. Nobody. It wasn't. Well, here's the other thing. Both parties are saying no infidelity happened. No physical abuse happened. It's just while his wife was pregnant, this camera video was leaked, and that it was 2 years ago because the babies were born 2 years ago, and
irreconcilable differences.
And there were things said that even Crowder admitted. He said, "I said some things that you're gonna hear about, and I said this X, Y, and Z. I'm going to blank you up, and you shouldn't say that to your significant other."
No,
no. And listen, I'm not saying I'm gonna be the brain dead guy and say, listen, guys get mad and they say dumb things, but that's not an excuse for it to happen.
Yeah.
But also, his wife is pregnant, and so I cannot. It's hard for me, especially seeing how my mom was when she was pregnant, and how much when my dad would be there for her, or if something would happen, even if it was a small thing, without the pregnancy, it became a big thing, and so stress is not good for the baby. I hear.
So I'm not completely out of. Well, I have been out of the news loop here for the last several days. They sent me to the doctor on Thursday thinking I may have been having a heart attack. That's no joke. Thankfully, I was not.
That's news to me.
Well, I didn't. I kept everybody in the dark until I found something out. I was not having a heart attack, thank God. Turns out that Joe Biden's administration saying that you mentioning kids, by the way, his administration saying that the parents are going to have to realize that the children do not solely belong to them; they belong to the state. Gave me indigestion, I believe. But anyway,
Steven Crowder.
It comes down to this all goes back. Yeah, so Steven Crowder wanted what was it, 150 million?
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah, and he should have known once he asked for that amount of money that they were going to say no, and so it's just kind of like things have begun to spiral down
for him, especially.
Yeah, and I'm going to say this. Look, we have to keep 2024 in mind because I mentioned what I said about Joe Biden saying that the kids were not solely the parents.
Right.
That goes all the way back to a book that Hillary Clinton wrote called Takes a Village. And that is what the left want to do, is they want to control the family. Yeah. I had a conversation about this last night with somebody about the destruction of the nuclear family and why they want to do it. Mm-hmm. It just makes it so much easier for people to destroy. And when we have these wars going on within the conservative movement, and I say conservative movement because even though Crowder really doesn't consider himself conservative per se, he would consider himself, I believe, more libertarian. But his views are very conservative. It is something that conservatives can rally behind. Look, I mean, have you seen all these trans people who are? And I'm just making I'm just saying it like it is. I'm not. Look, if you were born a male, you're a male. Sorry. And if you were born a female, you're a female. I'm doing that because a lot of these trans people are getting very, very violent. They're making talking. In fact, there was one who the one I can't remember where she's at, Ohio or somewhere. She's in the legislature, mm-hmm. and they have like even Democrats voted to put them out of the legislative body. So the last thing we need with all of that chaos and nonsense going on is this infighting going on because we don't get to the penny what we think we're owed.
Yeah.
And that's where I think a lot of this stems from. I think a lot of this stems from Crowder feels as though he is owed more than what he is. He's demanding more than what he's earning.
Yeah, and I think that's a good topic to talk about in terms of a lot of people feel that way. A lot of people.
He's not alone. Absolutely.
That's fine. Yeah, everybody does it though.
Even in your local jobs, you've got people. I mean, I know somebody right now who will hold up a job, not with a gun, but he'll just not show up for 3 and 4 weeks until they give him a pay raise. Right? So, I mean, it's I get it. People want more money, but you also have to look at, what's the demand?
You have to have something to bargain with, if you're going to demand things. Now, I'm not saying, to keep it on the topic of Steven Crowder asking for things and just the infighting.
Yeah.
We can't fight amongst one another.
No.
And by we, I mean America.
Right.
I'm going to make it broad. The left and the right does not need to fight against each other.
Right.
We have enough people in the world, like bricks, who just do not like us. And we can say, well, you know what the biggest issue is? That trans kids aren't represented.
Right.
I couldn't care less because my gas prices are going up.
Yeah. Like I said, everything's going up except for Joe Biden's testosterone.
Everything is going up, and it's pretty bad because I would love to just I'm fine with paying my dues. And I would like to think, hey, I've been putting in a lot of work. Why can't I get more? But it's like we do have a Christian basis here at the Exchange Podcast. A lot of us Christians do this to God. Hey, I've been really praying every day. I've been in the Bible every day. I've been
yeah.
It's just being faithful, and if you're faithful to God, then you're able to be faithful to your fellow Americans. I'm faithful to my fellow Americans in terms of, listen, I pay taxes. I'm willing to put my life on the line if God calls me into defending somebody.
Right.
And I'm willing to fight for things that I believe in, but I'm not willing to fight other Americans, and that's what we shouldn't be doing. There have been countless videos of trans advocates and transgender people saying, listen, I would love for you to try to stop me from going to the bathroom of my choosing.
But wouldn't you say, now, we're not physically shooting at one another.
Not yet.
But and hopefully it doesn't come to that. But wouldn't you say Americans are already fighting amongst themselves?
Yeah, no. Oh, we've been fighting amongst ourselves for a while, ever since I was born. That's for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, it's ramping up to a point now where there is physical violence that is like never before.
Sure, and I was gonna finish. Let me finish my point on the. It's not just transgender people saying that. I've heard people on the right who are like, just getting out of it. I'd love to see them try to come into our schools, and I'm like, listen, dog, like it's really not that big of a deal. You'll probably have 2 or 3 people show up at the school saying they demand trans rights. Luckily, in certain states like Arkansas, just vote it down if you're able to articulate why it should be voted down. But if the people want to vote it in, listen, let them vote it in. Are my kids going to that school? No. Are my kids? It all depends on what you want to do. I can't help everyone.
Right.
Okay. Once you come to the understanding that you can't help everybody, but you'd be willing to help everybody, I think that's the most American thing to be, is willing and able, but knowing that you can't do it all, and that's okay.
No, right. And now, I'm not saying that there's not people who talk stupid on the right. There are plenty of people who talk stupid on the right, and some of them probably would follow through with it.
Unfortunately.
When I say trans people, I'm not picking on trans people.
There are people who happen to be trans who are doing dumb things.
But there are those within that culture,
sure,
who are calling for trans people to become militant. I'm going to use the word militant because they are calling on them to what? They're trying to make this another civil rights movement, and we all know how violent civil rights clashes got.
I just
right?
don't. I hate that so much.
I couldn't blame you. I mean, because I personally, I'm a white guy, and I'm going. They're not the same. They're not even. They're worlds apart.
Listen, I'll fight somebody if they try to discriminate heavily against the color of my skin.
I will defend a person who wants to identify as the opposite sex. What I mean is, they have the right to do that. Okay? You have the right to want to play that fantasy if you want to. You do not have the right to try to drag me into that fantasy. That's the problem.
Yeah, and I think what happens, and I'm just going to sound, I will play the advocate as much as I can for the other side. I think when we say fantasy, I think a lot of them feel belittled by the idea of fantasy, because somebody could say, my dream of being a dad with a house and a wife is a fantasy. And I would be really upset with somebody if they told me that when I was younger, like, you can try to live that fantasy all you want. And I'd be pretty upset too. But I think something, I don't know, maybe there's a lack of better words, and that's why we use fantasy or make believe. But look, is it something that I look at and I say, oh, that's reality? It's not reality for me. It is reality for them. And it's like I said,
but it doesn't make it reality.
It does. No, I'm not saying it does. But you're right. I can concede the idea of, don't drag people into what you think is reality.
Because first off, I would ask the question to anybody who would say to you, hey, you wanting to be a dad, you wanting to own a home, you wanting to be the breadwinner. When they would say, well, just continue living that fantasy. Why is that a fantasy? Why would they say it's a fantasy?
Because they don't have it.
Okay, well, but there's probably one of two reasons. One, either at the time they saw you making, and I'm not saying you did, okay, I'm using this as an example. They saw you making some boneheaded decisions, and they were like, okay, if you don't change this course of action, that's a fantasy.
Right.
Okay, the other would be they never did, so they don't want you to.
Right.
Okay, so then they try to hold you back and talk to you. When I say that trans people are living a fantasy, I can say I'm Aquaman. And in today's culture, people have to accept if I believe that. You know what the difference is? Try to go live in the bottom of the ocean.
Well, I do understand the argument of, why would I choose to have people hate me? Why would I choose to live a life where people are going to hate me?
Well, that's just welcome to Christianity.
Okay, but I will say, the question stands. Why would somebody, like the whole being gay is a choice?
Yeah.
I am fervently, as a Christian, a believer in the original sin and how sin is within us. So therefore, being gay isn't a choice. Gay actions are the choice.
Uh-huh.
Being attracted to men, if you're a man, is not a choice. If you find a dude attractive, just like I can't choose to find my wife attractive. I was attracted to her, and that was natural. Now, the actions I chose after finding out those attractions, those are my choice.
Right.
But being gay, in all intents and purposes, and I will say this with my whole chest, and I'll stand behind it till the day I die, being gay is a sin to me. Therefore, sin is natural to humans, unfortunately. And therefore, that right there, why would somebody choose to do that so that they could be hated by their family, their friends?
Yeah.
And I would say I can understand that. I don't think you're choosing to be gay. I do think you're choosing to be active. And
when I say fantasy, that is not to slight any one individual. But at the same token, if I say, okay, you think that you were born male and you think you're a female, or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And then I come back and I say, I think you've got some psychological issues going on.
Yeah.
Okay. You can disagree with me on that. I will disagree with you on that. Where my problem is when they then start trying to do exactly what they've done to Tucker Carlson, what they've done to, what they've done to Dan Bongino, what they've done to these people that, when Tucker Carlson, and he wasn't even talking about transgenderism, he's talking about January 6th.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we learn, was that Monday? He loses his job.
Yeah, Friday he signs off, Monday he loses.
Come to find out, he was in the middle of show prep for that Monday evening show when they told him it's not going on the air tonight.
Yeah.
Okay. The thing about that is the whole time he was running the January 6th material, he had people like Chuck Schumer and even Republicans who were saying that Fox News needed to more or less censure him or put him off.
Right.
Okay. We are in a time when you cannot disagree with somebody. Like you and I right now obviously have, and it's okay. That's what the Exchange podcast is all about. we have a little bit of disagreements on verbiage.
Sure.
And when I say fantasy, I'm not saying that to belittle somebody. I'm saying that just because you believe it doesn't make it real.
Sure.
I can say I want to be a pilot of a B-52 in the Air Force. If I'm not making the moves to do that, it's a fantasy, right? But there also comes do I have the capacity to do that? You understand what I'm saying? Because there is a certain level of intelligence, and I don't know if I've got it or not because I've never tried it, but there is a certain level of intelligence to fly those machines. They're complicated. It requires a lot of discipline. I probably could have, as a younger person, disciplined myself.
Sure,
Probably still
right.
could. But but there's nothing I can do that will change the way I'm created.
Right.
That is a capacity issue.
Yeah.
And so, I say the word fantasy not to belittle the individual who truly believes that about themselves. I say that as the culture within who says, if you do not go along with this, we will cancel you and have your life ruined.
Sure. And I understand that. I would say that maybe my mind would change. Maybe my mind would change if we were a multi-million subscriber channel with deals and all that, and people were coming after my livelihood because I may have said the wrong thing, and it's like, this is ridiculous. I'm, as a simple man who is making a living with his wife in a house, and just trying to figure things out.
Sure.
And be a peacekeeper as Christ called me to be, in terms of, I'm not going to change my whole worldview because of you. However, I will meet you at the tavern. I will come hang out with the prostitutes.
Right.
I will hang out with the sinners, not to go hang out with them where they're at, but to invite them so that they can come and meet me where I know Christ wants them to be, and to talk with them. Because I've heard so many times, and I've done my own research on this, and I would tell any listener right now, there is no hate like Christian love, and I've heard that many times. And I know a lot of people say they have,
break that down.
The church hurt, right? Like everybody being upset that, like, I would go on to say 70% of the church hurt is people being called out for their actions and like, hey, this isn't good, you should be doing that. And then they felt embarrassed, and they're like, oh, I'm hurt because I'm embarrassed. And then I would say there's 30% genuinely where someone told a pastor a secret, and that pastor aired it out in front of people.
And that does happen.
And it's like, okay, that is very
But I can also tell
toxic.
you, I can also tell you, being one who is and has studied years for ministry,
Sure.
that is one of the things that they are constantly keeping on the front line is, do not use a person that you've counseled as an example.
No, for sure. And that is real. Now the other, I should change it from 70 to 60%, 20%, and then 10% of it. And this is where, and for those of you who are my age, you understand that 10% is parents weren't teaching their kids to not be jerks at church. There were a lot of pastors' kids. There were a lot of people who made fun of the pastors' kids. And there was a lot of like kids who were just downright disgusting. And I'll say that, again, I will stand by that 100%. I've watched it.
Yeah.
I've been a part of it. I've been made fun of. And a lot of kids who are growing up and they're like, yeah, Jesus is great. And this guy over here in church, he's coming to youth group with me. He's great. But also, he found out I tried smoking pot.
Right.
And now he's telling everybody I'm an terrible, terrible, terrible human being.
Yeah.
And now all of middle school and high school, people latch onto that. Oh, they're a terrible human being. Why? Oh, well, the pastor's kid found out that they did something or whatever. And then
It's a complete lack of wisdom.
Right, because the adults of the time, and yes, a lot of people will say, oh, you can't just put on the adults. Yes, I can. Kids are dumb, all right? And you as adults, anybody who's listening to this, if you're an adult and you have a kid who's doing something dumb, you don't have to smack them upside the head. But here's the thing. Pull them to the side and tell them they're being absolutely ridiculously disgusting. Because human beings will be disgusting from childhood all the way up because nobody put a wall in front of them and said, this is a boundary. That kid who doesn't have a dad, you, as another kid, don't need to make fun of them if you're going to say you're a Christian of them not having a dad. If you find out that that kid decided to find his comfort in another human being, meaning they had sexual intercourse before they were married as kids, you as a child of God, if you want to claim that you're the pastor's kid, you're the worship leader's kid, you're whatever, you want to go over there and you want to ridicule them, I don't care who you are. Parents, you need to step up and you need to tell that kid, you're being disgusting. That's not how you should be.
But now, hold on. Now, I'm going to defend pastors' kids here. I've got to. I am one.
Sure.
If we want to talk church hurt, I can talk that all day long.
Yeah.
Coming from, everybody wants to put the pastor's kid on this pedestal.
Sure.
Without realizing, wait a minute, that kid's, whatever age, 13, 14.
Right.
And so the correction has to be made on both ends.
Yeah.
If the kid's doing that, someone needs to stand there and say, hey, that's going too far. But at the same token, where we have gotten to is we have gotten to the point, and this goes back to our discussion about all the stuff that's going on with in the media right now. I personally haven't watched Fox News in over 2 years.
Sure.
Don't care to. But you can't help but hear the people that are losing jobs. Don Lemon. Of course, I think a lot of that has to do with the ratings were just in the tank.
Yeah, sure.
And I think they looked and gone, okay, Tucker's gone, let's get rid of him. But at the end of the day, we have gotten to the point that let's exclude the whoever is ridiculing that person. That should not be done. But I promise you, and you know this, ridicule happens just as much outside the church.
Sure.
But if a minister stands behind a pulpit and says sex before marriage is a sin, right? You got people who's ready to go to war over that.
Sure.
And well, how dare you? Well, it's not me. It's the scripture. And so breaking that down, you preach, the Bible says, and it does say, that in the beginning God created male and female. Jesus said in Matthew, he said, from the beginning created male and female.
Sure.
And so, if you say that, there are people that want to put that in the category of hate crime. So we have taken things that we say, well, that's ridicule. And ridicule coming from a preacher's kid, a layman's kid, someone in the church, that's something that needs to be handled inside the church by whoever's there. And the scripture specifically gives us guidelines on how to do that. But at the same time, we also have to understand that there are things that have to be addressed. And if a person says, well, I'm finding comfort in having sexual relations with someone I'm not married to, I'm sorry. Because now you're out of relationship with God.
Right. Okay. Right. So let's make one thing clear. Grown adults can get that ridicule every step of the way.
And teenagers are exempt. Why?
Teenagers aren't exempt. Teenagers do not need to be ridiculed by other teenagers because all teenagers are dumb. So what I'm getting at is that the pastor kid, and I'm not talking about a specific one.
But what's the ridicule? What the line of ridicule are we talking about?
The ridicule is that you got these kids who, for one reason or another, don't have the wherewithal from their parents because they do kind of get away with a lot more stuff in the church because they are pastors' kids.
Let's break it down.
Okay, I'll break it down.
What do they get down
Okay,
with?
fine, let me break it down. You have these kids who are pastors' kids, and they know everything about the Bible, and every kid, no matter who... They act like they do. They act like they do. So when they're sitting... First of all, I'm the youth group here, and I'll use my youth group as an example.
Okay.
There are kids who do know the Bible more than others, significantly. I've got kids who don't even have shoes who come to church, and they know nothing about the Bible.
Okay.
They don't have two parents in the home, but you have kids who do have two parents in the home, and they come up and that's like, hey, what is the reason for this? And they're the Sheldon Cooper of the group. They raise their hand really quickly. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's this. And I have to tell them, okay, it's cool. Don't worry about it. When somebody says the wrong answer and that same person is like, what? No, that's not how that goes. It's this. It's this. It's this. It's like, okay, listen. I have to pull them to the side and say, listen, shut up. All right. You're making them feel terrible. Well, they don't know the answer.
Do you go and have a conversation with that kid's parents?
Every single time.
Okay. And then do you have a conversation with that kid's parents along with that kid?
Every single time I get the opportunity.
Okay. Then what is your...
The issue is that teenagers don't need to ridicule other teenagers because...
That's going to happen.
Okay. No, it's not if you teach them not to. It's not going to happen if you teach them not to. I'm not saying, oh, it should be this way. It will be this way. For instance, when Sarah and I, my wife, have a kid, and my kid, who will be growing up in the Word, he will be the pastor's kid of the youth group, and everybody knows it. I will tell my kid, listen, I'm not going to call on you, okay? I will do what my dad did. I will refuse to coach them, essentially, because I'm not going to take favorites. I'm not going to let them feel as though they know more than another kid, because some kids, some pastors' kids, some, not all, and I know that's your camp, your pastor's kid, this is great. I was not. Some pastors' kids don't understand how life is. Like, I knew what life was at 12 years old on Christmas Day when I found out my dad wasn't coming home because he was cheating on my mom.
But
all right?
Then if you're not a pastor's kid, you can only understand real life if you're not a pastor's kid.
No, I'm not saying you can only understand. I'm saying the pastors don't let their kids experience real life because sometimes...
Okay, again, how do you know that?
Sometimes they get overprotected, and you can tell because the other kids are talking a certain way. Not saying they're being the best kids, but they're talking a certain way. And me as an adult who has gone through that life, I've seen great examples of pastors' kids who are like, yeah, hey, I know exactly what you're talking about, but... I'm not going to make you feel bad because this is the life you live.
Yeah. So okay, and I will give you this. A lot of, and I'm going to say kids, okay, because kids are this way. The one who doesn't, and this goes back to virtue signaling. Any kid that does not really know certain aspects of life, okay,
Sure.
They always want to chime in when it's their peer. This is the problem we have. Period across the board.
Okay.
Kids don't go to an authority figure to talk. You know who they go to? They go to their peer.
Yeah.
Guess who gives them advice? Their peer.
Sure.
Okay? So there's a lot of this stuff that we discuss when these kids will discuss that the parents are out of earshot altogether.
Sure.
At the same time, you cannot completely ignore this one kid because you assume they have privilege.
No, I don't think anyone's being ignored. No, in fact, I know no one's being ignored. What's happening is this person, and I'm not assuming anyone has privilege. I will say there are different types of privilege all across the board. I'm not even bringing white or black. The privilege across the board is parental privilege. You have two parents in the home, a mother and a father. Financial privilege, that's just for anybody. If you've got enough money to where you don't have to stress over things, that's a nice privilege. And I don't ignore people because they have privilege. What I do is, as an adult, you need to put certain kids in their place for certain things. I have a kid who gets angry, not the pastor's kid, who gets angry, and when he gets angry, he lashes out. So I have to physically put myself between him and someone else, and I have to hold him there and tell him this isn't right. Just like I tell the pastor's kid to shut up sometimes because it's like, hey, listen, you need to stop. Like other people aren't going to learn. I have to tell him and shut up is harsh. I'm not saying I tell him shut up all the time. It's just mainly like that's just me saying it because I'm fired up. Sometimes when I tell him, hey, listen, I need you to hold back and let your other classmates answer because they won't learn if all you do is answer. If all you do is answer, then they're not going to get an opportunity to at least think it through. And then if they can't get it, I will ask you. I appreciate that you know the things that I ask you to know, but I want other people to start critically thinking of the verses that we are going over. We're going through Proverbs. Super easy, barely an inconvenience for anyone to learn what Proverbs is. It's just a book of wisdom, all right? You know, it's gotten a lot better with this pastor's kid and another couple of pastor kids. And it's like, hey, I know you guys know the answer. Just give everybody else a second, and then we'll come to you guys. It becomes a problem when things are just blurted out. And then it's a laughing stock of ha ha ha, I just made a joke and everybody's laughing. It's like, listen, maybe you get away with this at home, but not here.
Well, I think in some cases we call them class clowns, and that doesn't come down to preachers' kids. There's some people who just like there's some people who just like attention, right? And
sure.
that does not get relegated to preachers' kids only.
Sure. I will say that's not just a preacher's kid thing, but I will say
and I
what
remember
the issue is when somebody says, I have a girlfriend and we did this, and then the preacher's kid who's again, I'm not saying they can't experience life unless they go out and sin and do all these crazy things. But as a parent, so I will be a parent eventually one day. One day when I'm a parent, I'm sitting with my kid and they ask me questions, I will tell them, listen, you could go out and have sex before marriage. I did. But it ain't going to work out the way you want it to.
Right.
Meaning, as the parent, this is what I'm getting at. As the adults of the church, we should be telling kids, pastors' kids and otherwise. Pastors' kids are easy because it's easier because I see them more. If you're at a church, you're going to see a pastor's kids more than you're going to see the outside kids. It is our job to tell them, listen, you can't say blank. You can't do this. Well, why? I'll tell you.
Well, let me ask you this. Is the kid and I'm just using this as a general, again, this is going to go back to who do kids go to? They go to their peers, right?
Sure.
Okay. If they're telling that kid or a number of kids, me and my girlfriend are having sex.
Sure.
Maybe they are, maybe they're not. Kids like to brag about stuff of that nature.
Oh, especially young boys, yeah.
I don't care if it's a preacher's kid or who the kid is. Someone needs to be there to call them out on it.
No, of course. But to call them out when they're bragging about it makes total sense. Coming out with it as a confession and then ridiculing them for confessing it, that's my problem.
Well,
So
yeah,
Thomas, I come to you and I'm like, hey, Thomas, listen, last night was sick. I got drunk. We got crossfaded. We were doing all these crazy things. If you come to me and you're like, JaVaughn, you can't do that. Like, that's just wrong. Yeah. Because you hear the pride in my voice. Now, if I come to you and I'm like, hey, Thomas, I really messed up. Me and my girlfriend, we slept with each other,
right,
with one another, and it's just like we got together. If you want me to come back to this church, your first instinct isn't to go, I told you so, or you idiot. It's not to chastise. It's to, hey, I'm here for you.
Yeah, that's human nature. I mean, for people to do stuff like that, they shouldn't do it. I mean, that's, no, if someone comes to you in a confession, but see, that's
more often than not, that's the problem.
Here's what we've got to be careful of, though, and this is what I'm talking about when we're talking about. First off, teenagers shouldn't be confessing that to other teenagers.
No.
Because they are, look, and here's the deal. That's what I'm saying. It goes back to, and this has been a problem in the church ever since I was a kid.
Sure.
And I'm sure well before that. Peers confess to peers. Well, what you're doing is you are confessing something to somebody that has as much wisdom in the subject as you do.
Sure.
So when that person mishandles it, that's where it has to go, hey, that doesn't need to be discussed.
Yeah.
At all.
No, that's fine. Again, nobody's confessing things, to my knowledge, to one another. They're usually young men are bragging about it.
Sure.
The confession comes up when a kid who doesn't understand confession and they don't understand that, hey, you can pull, and I have to tell them. I'll pull them to the side and I'll be like, hey, if you want to talk about that type of stuff, why don't you just tell me so the other people don't know? It's none of their business.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You're the one they need to be talking to about, or the pastor.
Yes.
And again, in something of that nature, especially when it comes to anything of that nature, because at the end of the day, and I'm not saying that's happening around here, but at the end of the day, we don't exactly know what's going on in those homes.
No, we don't. But so to circle back to what I was saying about the adults with students and how it got into the flared up conversation because a pastor's kids got brought up. I'm speaking on behalf of a pastor's kid who told me how terrible life was as a pastor's kid because they were part of the issue sometimes. I'm speaking as somebody who is more upset with the parents of any child. I've told every child, I go out of my way to, one of the kids were like, oh, my parents aren't going to be home, so I'm just going to walk home. And it's like, no, why don't you stay at the church, wait till your parents get home, and I'll take you home.
Yeah.
Because A, I wanted to make sure they were safe, but B, I speak to their parents. I'm like, hey, listen, this happened. I want you to know that we handled it this way. And if it happens in the future, I'm just going to have to keep letting you know, and I hope that we can figure out a way that you can handle that business. And usually it doesn't happen again. I'm not saying I have an issue with pastors' kids going around being the Catholic Church in the 1700s. 1600s.
Well, I know what you're saying.
But I want to get my point across that the issue I have is parents who, this is a small church, okay? Whether they're kids at the age of 3 all the way up to 17, it is really hard for me to believe that they're not hearing some of the things these kids are saying, because it's a small church. And the kids...
You're talking about
I'm talking about adults in general. We as adults at this church church, across the board, as adults, need to be willing to put our foot down. And even if the kid is like, I'm never coming back here, that kid, because it's happened to me when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I guess this is anecdotal evidence, so take it with a grain of salt. After having a pastor tell me I'm not allowed to do certain thing, I didn't go back to that church, but I never did that thing again. Because I realized, okay, he's an adult. Even though I don't like his attitude towards me, I need to fix my ways. Right. You're right. They don't need to be confessing to one another. They don't have the capability or any capacity to correct each other. But when they do say something like, hey, last weekend I smoked pot, it would be good for us adults to start teaching the kids who are part of the church, like, hey, if somebody comes to you and they tell you something, tell an adult, A, tell an adult, but B, try to comfort them without encouraging that behavior, but telling them like, hey, I know the Bible says this, not ridicule them or chastise them in any way, shape, or form, because that happens far too often. And that's the church hurt that happens that I think a lot of people stick with, because a lot of people will go, I remember middle school, a bunch of the kids were picking on me because my parents were divorced and I said that I got into drinking at a very young age, this and that. And those people are grown up in the church. I don't want to go back to a church if those people are still there. It's like, you're right. I wouldn't want to either. And I don't blame you for not wanting to go to church. So I think that's just where I got into it. And gosh, dang it. That was like,
well, this is the way it is clear across the board. And of course, I'm not a part of any of those conversations. So I'm not going to particularly take any side. And what you're saying about the ridicule part, I agree with. I wasn't, and I certainly wasn't upset at what you were saying about preachers' kids per se.
Yes, he was. He is a preacher's kid.
I will take certain umbrage with certain parts and aspects of it.
Sure.
But even in the adult part of it, there comes a point when pastors will even tell people that they're counseling with. And I know one pastor in particular who, after 6 sessions, he tells the people, look, I'm going to have to refer you to someone with a little bit more experience in this.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that most preachers are not licensed counselors.
Sure. No, I get that.
And in certain states like California, there's pastors that are in prison. One in particular who is in prison right now for the rest of his life because he counseled a man who was in the homosexual lifestyle, and the man ended up committing suicide. Do I think that should have been laid at the feet of the pastor? No. But what they said is that, well, you're not a professional counselor, and you should have referred that person to a professional counselor. So I don't care what level you are. There always comes that point that is not an admittance of I don't know my job or I don't know what I'm doing. There does come a point when you have to look at the person and go, I think we have exhausted to the point that I can help you. And I think you need to talk to somebody. And see, that's what I'm trying to say. Peers talk to peers.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these kids will go and confess this stuff. They shouldn't be doing that.
Sure.
And the problem is their lack of wisdom in who they're confessing to, then they're shocked at the lack of wisdom on how it's responded to.
Yeah, well,
you get what I'm saying?
No, I get that, and I agree. I'm
so
in that boat.
And so that I'm not blaming the kid who's confessing, because the kid may be trying to get something off their chest.
Yeah.
But the reason I'm a little alerted about, not this situation, okay? I'm talking about situations in general. If that kid confesses something illegal sexually,
yeah,
you're making that other kid responsible.
No, I'm not.
Right?
Yeah.
No, not you. I mean, they're
right.
making that other kid, and they don't understand that, right? They don't understand that, and that's the reason why that it's like how do you get? And we're a little bit off course from what we started, but it's okay. How do you get them to go, hey, you need to come talk to an adult. You need to talk to someone who can get you through the proper channels.
Sure, and I don't. we were talking about with Lemon, Crowder, and Tucker Carlson. That's important. And what really got me going was the interest you had in hearing about what the kids are going through.
Yeah.
So I would say that's part of what the exchange is that we get on a topic and we just get rolling. I don't think we should apologize for that. But no, you're right. If a kid says something like, "Yeah, my teacher, picked me up from school and did something to me," that other kid is gonna be like, "Whoa, shucks,
yeah,
I don't know what to say here. I don't know what to do." See, I think that's why
and it's anybody's guess how that's handled.
Well, see, here's the thing. I know right now, for me, God has put it on my heart, hey, these kids need to hear true wisdom.
Yeah.
And the easiest wisdom I've ever gotten was Proverbs.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been going through Proverbs, and I tell them, hey, there's different types of women. Mm-hmm. There is wisdom, who she wants you to prosper, and there's folly, who wants you to crumble. And so what I get after is I tell them, like, communication is key.
Yeah.
I tell them all the time, you can tell Pastor Chris, you could talk to Brother Thomas, you could talk to Chandler, you could talk to Zach, to the boys. I tell them, you can talk to any of those men. Those men have lived a life, not all of their life, but they've lived longer lives than you. And you can ask them things. And I have a boy, I'm not going to mention his name, obviously, because, it's a child. But I have a young man who comes to me every Wednesday and talks to me about how his life is going.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the fruit of being a youth pastor, but also I see it as a potential for every adult to have that opportunity to just, my encouragement, which I think I get this from my mom, can sound a little abrasive, but it's when we are focused on the church as a whole, we need to remember what Jesus said. Let these little ones come to me. Yeah. And if we want those little ones to come to him, we have to be little Christians enough to be welcoming of, hey, you're going through this, you're going through that. I mean, I have to say, this is the one of the best exchanges we've had between each other, because
that's what it's all about.
You have a non-pastor's kid and a pastor's kid, just kind of talking about these things. And my biggest thing is let me put this here for anybody who's listening still, if you got to the end. I love the pastor's kids in my group. Yeah. Because I can talk to them about the Bible and they'll take it home, and I know they're talking to their parents. Right. And I just try to communicate to them, hey, I know you see it this way, but other people don't. So we have to let them get a chance to see it the same way, or in a way that is becoming of a Christian. Right. So I don't know. That was one of the best exchanges we've had between each other.
No, it was good. I'm not. Yeah, I mean, the back and forth is always, because number one, I want everybody to understand you don't have to agree with us to listen to us. As you heard today, we don't always agree on certain topics. That's okay. That's okay, because the friendship, the brotherhood in Christ far extends that. Yeah,
that's for sure. Again, I want to thank everybody for listening to the last episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. We have a lot of things coming up. We are at 50 subscribers.
Yeah,
and we haven't even hit 50 episodes. So, Lord willing, we can hit 100 subscribers before the 100th episode.
Yep. And absolutely, and hopefully, like I've said before, I would love to see 1,000 subscribers. Tell your friends. Like us on Facebook. Anywhere you get your podcasts, listen to us, like us, share us, hit that bell. Thank you for listening.
You guys have a good one.